play written by J.D. Evans Jr., starring Elvis D. Tripp and his traveling troupe of strange voices, and featuring the musical styling of Milford Whittle and his finger puppet marching band, with Sue Monty's silly announcements by Warhol the Potato. We continue with Chapter 25, Dream 9 and the Pretend FBI. Melvin Pimple, not his real name, director of the Pretend FBI, was asked more often than not, why Dream 9? And the answer, of course, was 9 is the largest single-digit integer. There was more to it than just 9 being the largest single-digit integer. Every group or organization needs to have a unique name, and many of these names are arithmetical and mathematical based on numbers. When Melvin Pimple, not his real name, director of the Pretend FBI, was working with the Quark, he learned that in the Quark universe, names were numbers, formulas, series, progression, and other such things. For example, there was one group of Quark who called themselves the Fibonacci. There was another group of Quark who called themselves worlds. They were a series, and it appeared logical to call themselves World Series, a baseball analogy, metaphor, or simile. There were the Busy Beavers, a quite elusive group with a woodchuck-sounding name that, more than anything, describes the difficulty and complexity of the problem they seemed to be obsessed with solving, which was finding an upper bound on the number of operations done by a halting Turing machine of a given size, a problem the best of mathematical minds have been unable to solve, thereby making the Busy Beaver mathematical problem perhaps the most difficult of all mathematical problems, even more difficult than determining whether infinity is the largest possible number. If infinity is a number, observing is generally presumed to be a number, then what happens if you multiply it by 2? Do you have 2 infinities? If you have 2 infinities, then do you need a double car to run? These and other questions often are asked, but more than anything, some people wonder why the name Dream 9 was chosen. Why not Dream 99 or Dream 999? Why not Dream 1, Dream 2, or Dream 3? Why was it an integer rather than a real number or an imaginary number with a component which is the square root of -1? There were so many questions that years ago Melvin Pimple, not his real name, director of the Pretend FBI, stopped trying to answer them and just referred the inquisitive to the official introductory page of the Dream 9 handbook, which, like the page in the handbook in the glove compartment of Ugly Nightly's beautiful black high-heel slipper with a cute ankle strap and open toe, had the words, "This page intentionally left blank," and was all that appeared to be there, in great contrast to the absence of a similar book in Ilgon Ilgo's beautiful black high-heel slipper with a cute ankle strap and open toe. The entry page of the official Dream 9 handbook only had the word, "This page intentionally left blank," which for most inquisitive people was simply too puzzling to make any possible sense. Yet, when they asked Melvin Pimple, not his real name, director of the Pretend FBI, how this page intentionally left blank had anything to do with the origin and meaning of the name Dream 9, Melvin Pimple, not his real name, director of the Pretend FBI, referred them to the unpublished Book of Solutions for Every Puzzle and left it at that. Melvin Pimple, not his real name, director of the Pretend FBI, was focused on discovering every possible thing about the Grand Eye of Tole and his followers, the Slammers, while Dream 9 was focused on being the best security service and courier for the Branos. Melvin Pimple, not his real name, director of the Pretend FBI, was provided regular status reports on Dream 9 to keep him informed on the general activities of the group. In the same way as Melvin Pipple, not his real name, director of the Pretend FBI, was working with Professor Dave Darkstone to make sense of the Grand Eye of Tole and the Slammers, Dream 9 was trying to be the best security and carrier service for the company and the Brainos themselves. The Dream 9 courier ship was approaching Ginger Island, that section of space in the Neapolitan Nebula where unusual things were known to occur. The courier ship itself was a Dragon Master 10,000, and in addition to being heavily armed, it was capable of near light speed when traveling in the relativistic sponge that surrounded Ginger Island. As was customary, Captain Undertone made the announcement that the ship was going to jump. Ship pilot Brooklyn Armory then announced,
"Hold on to something, because the jump is happening in just a few seconds."
Captain Undertone's name was inspired by a copying machine, while Brooklyn Armory's name was inspired by the building where her parents met at a dance. The bell that signaled the jump chimed in, and the ship jumped. Following the jump, the ship was near enough to Ginger Island to dock, and after docking, Captain Undertone and ship's pilot, Brooklyn Armory, disembarked and headed to the nearby lounge and ordered drinks and something to eat. Sitting in a nearby table in a private booth, Melvin Pipple, not his real name, director of the Pretend FBI, was preparing to eavesdrop on Captain Undertone and ship's pilot Brooklyn Armory as they each enjoyed a happy beverage and something to eat. Melvin Pipple, not his real name, director of the Pretend FBI, had arrived a few days earlier and was anticipating the arrival of Captain Undertone and ship's pilot Brooklyn Armory. It was not so often that Melvin Pipple, not his real name, director of the Pretend FBI, had the opportunity to eavesdrop on anyone from Dream 9. Dream 9's role as security and couriers for the Brainos naturally was secretive regarding its activities. The latest Dream 9 scuttlebutt was focused on the upcoming travel of the Imperial Director and his Arvelian consort, Lolawagi, as they were transported to the Imperial Director's home world for a scheduled visit. The Imperial Director did not get to visit his home world very often, so this was a big event. As all of his species had to do from time to time, the Imperial Director, even though he now was a Braino, was compelled to visit the hot springs of his home world and to radiate in its humidity. Although as a Braino, all he could do was measure it rather than enjoy it physically. Captain Undertone and ship's pilot Brooklyn Armory were growing more puzzled by the minute now that in a surprising event, the lounge transformed into a rail car being pulled by a locomotive. And at the far end of the rail car, a tall, blonde German man appeared in what people on Earth would describe as an Obersturmbführer Nazi uniform and began walking toward Captain Undertone and the ship's pilot, Brooklyn Armory. The train slowed and came to a halt as the tall German SS officer reached Captain Undertone and ship's pilot, Brooklyn Armory. Not a word was said, but the three of them looked at each other, and the puzzle continued. Of the three of them standing there, looking at each other in the now halted rail car, one would have to say that Obersturmbführer Zimmel Clapper clearly was the most startled and confused, and perhaps adding to the confusion, Obersturmbführer Zimmel Clapper asked in a distinct German accent, "Why am I here?" As if Captain Undertone and ship's pilot Brooklyn Armory would have any idea. In an odd way, things were becoming clearer, and Captain Undertone, ship's pilot Brooklyn Armory, and Obersturmbführer Zimmel Clapper realized simultaneously that the rail car they were in actually was configured for dining, and there were tables nearby which had plates, knives, forks, spoons, and glasses. Soon, a group of waiters appeared carrying trays and motioning for Captain Undertone, ship's pilot Brooklyn Armory, and Obersturmbführer Zimmel Clapper to sit at one of the tables, which they did. And a French-looking gentleman named Bertrand Lefebvre appeared and asked the three startled people if they preferred wine or perhaps snot and beer. Captain Undertone and ship pilot Brooklyn Armory asked for Cabernet Sauvignon, and Oversturmfuhrer Zimmelklapper asked for snot and beer.
Appetite, snap, and beer.
The dining car had loudspeakers mounted in its ceiling, and music suitable for dining was heard when a chime rang, and an announcer made the announcement, blah, 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 or as translated,
Grab your balls and hit the wings, cause it's Super Tuesday, and every third game is free.
Melvin Pipple, not his real name, director of the Pretend FBI, was seen at the far end of the dining car enjoying what looked to be a Dr. Pepper soda pop and good and plenty candy, and then chuckled to himself that this almost makes no sense. But in an odd way, it makes a lot of sense. Thus ends the 25th chapter of Extreme Gravity, Dream 9 and the Pretend FBI. Stay tuned for the next chapter, Knockley Knockley and Ilgon Ilgo. This has been brought to you by the fabulously fabulous, marvelously marvelous, wonderfully wonderful science fiction theater of the imagination. I'm Warble the